All right, so welcome to the Rebranding Middle Age podcast. I'm Krista O'Reilly Davidigui, and I offer my work as a writer, grief and trauma-informed mind-body coach, and joyful living educator. My work is for freedom seekers, truth tellers, and stubborn questioners, highly sensitive souls, slow movers, and non-hustlers, the anxious, grieving, weary, and healing, reforming people pleasers, perfectionists, performers, and peacekeepers, and otherwise brave, messy, curious humans ready to quiet the conditioning and noise to reclaim freedom, wholeness, and joy. I'm glad you're here. So today I'm welcoming two more guests to join me for a conversation around the idea of letting go of the life you wanted and embracing the one you have. And before we actually get into the conversation, I wanted to offer a gentle reminder to anybody here with us, listening, watching the replay. This can be a really tender topic, depending on what you're navigating in your life. And so as you listen, not everything that we talk about today may feel helpful to the season that you're in. So for instance, I'm thinking about when you're in the depths of deep, deep grief, for instance, you may not want to hear a conversation about, facing the reality of your life and any of that. You may need to actually walk away and just go take care of yourself. I've been there as well. And so I really want you to focus on safety first and just taking really good care of yourself first. Alrighty, so Dr. Mikala Albertson is a board-certified family practice doctor, author, and well-being advocate who's passionate about women's health and healing in the imperfect bodies we actually have. She's the author of the books Ordinary on Purpose and her brand new release this week, Everything I Wish I Could Tell You About Midlife. Mikala inspires readers every day to stop striving for quote unquote perfect lives or some unattainable cultural ideal of beauty and wellness, and instead aim for wholehearted living through a gentle, achievable, sustainable approach. And I think, Mikala, you and I first connected through email when your first book was coming out.
Yeah, we sure did. Thanks for
Yeah,
having me today.
Oh, absolutely. It's fun to finally be able to connect. And I know there's a lot of crossover in the themes that we are drawn to, I think, and that we talk about and share in our work.
Mm-hmm.
And my second guest, Jennifer, I forgot to write down your last name. Can you say it out loud for me?
I can. It's
Arns.
Arnspiger.
Say it again, please.
It's Arnspiger.
Arnspiger. Okay. Thank you. I would have pronounced it anyways. So that worked out. So Jennifer is a certified somatic trauma integration coach, an INFJ empath, and somatic writing coach for deeply sensitive women. She is highly sensitive, emotionally intense, and passionate about honoring what our bodies have been through and the stories and emotions they hold. Jennifer has been a trauma-informed writing coach for 7 years and helps deeply sensitive women resolve somatic trauma and come home to their bodies through writing, with private coaching, self-paced writing courses, and intimate writing circles. And at the end, Mikala and Jennifer will both share where they'd love you to come and connect with them and engage with their work. And so, Jennifer, you too, I see crossover in different ways between some elements of who we are, how we move through the world and show up to our work as well. And so it's a privilege and a pleasure to connect with both of you.
Thank you. It's a privilege and a pleasure to be here.
So a formal welcome to you both. And just repeating the overall theme here of the conversation, it's letting go of the life you wanted and embracing the one you have. This is a little side note reveal. So I was supposed to, according to my plans, I was supposed to write a blog post all about this, kind of go deep into it and record an episode earlier in October. And I just came face to face with reality, no, I cannot talk about this right now because I am just deeply here in the work. And I'm mad about it and resisting it, and sometimes okay with it and just able to be present in my experience. But yeah, I was just like, yeah, that was really lofty thinking, Krista, but I think we're going to pause a little bit. So, okay, so my work centers around the needs and experiences of women in the midlife season, 40s, 50s, and 60s. And um, if you're willing, and I also follow a seasonal living framework myself. And so the invitation to start off with is, would you share your age if you're comfortable doing so? And even more importantly, just tell me a little bit about the life season you're in, however you want to talk about that. So Jennifer, why don't we start with you?
Okay. Well, I am 47 and 48 is right around the corner. And I was looking at your hope graphic um, to try to identify like what season felt like the right answer. And I think I would say I'm in autumn. And I would say I'm in autumn on a couple different levels. Like I have a very real, like it's not intellectual at all. It's like my body can feel an old version of me dropping away, if not having dropped away already. And it's stark and very unsettling. And um I also I have that like a kind of hope or intention for how I'm going to live going forward that um I've never felt before. So it's got a very falling away, just trust it and watch it happen like you watch leaves fall off a tree sort of energy to it. And I find myself, just as a really quick note, deeply grateful for people like you who are talking about what it's like to be in midlife because it's such a surreal experience for me anyway when I'm starting to feel it, that I'm so very grateful that people like you and you, Mikala, are like giving women a concept of how normal that is. Like it's validating just to see you both nod at me as I say that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, like I'm a big fan of truth telling in general and having brave conversations. Um, like I don't fully understand like why we have such difficulty with this because it's so vital to our health as humans. But here we're talking about women, like to share our stories and normalize experiences and lift each other up simply by letting the other know, like, I see you, what you're going through is normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
So thank you. So a question, if I may.
Yeah.
All right. So autumn seasons can have a real intensity about them, like an emotional intensity. And sometimes there can be like, I describe it as kind of the veil is thinner. So like our tolerance can be lower, our ability to put up with other people's crap can be a lot lower. The capacity for that type of thing can be lower as we're really growing into like our true selves and what we really want and need and believe in. I'm just curious, are you noticing any of that?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, and it's I'm noticing all of that to answer the question. And it's actually only been a couple of months that I would say that that's true. I mean, I've been doing inner work, of course, which sort of it's a parallel path. And I'm grateful, so grateful for the inner work that I have done to find myself at this new starting point, because if I didn't have a level of peace and like capacity for emotional embodiment here, I don't know what I would do, because it's
Right.
the need to be able to like, I'm curious if you both, um, like if this speaks to you, but the need to be able to emotionally regulate and like have my own back feels even bigger in this space than it ever has before, because like you said, Krista, a lot of people don't talk about this. It's not terribly normalized for it to be an okay answer for me to say, I'm having, I'm having a hormonal shift and I can't deal with you right now, and that's okay. But like we need to be able to have that internal narrative. And so, yeah, short version, very
Yeah.
much.
So before we move to Mikala's response here, yes, I wanted to acknowledge that, like, I've said many times in my work before and been deeply grateful myself for all the hard work I had done before my 40s. And then it was like, oh my God, like now I was even going deeper, like, way beyond what I could have imagined. And I do think it's important to talk honestly about that. Like, this is hard work, but also it's freedom work. So that is what I think keeps us going, is like we get that taste, feeling, glimpse of freedom like we've never experienced before. And so it helps us to kind of go into the work. But had I not done the work of my 30s, for instance, I don't think I would have made it through these past years of my life. So yeah, they helped me kind of put down deep roots, my early 40s as well.
Yeah.
So Mikala, what season are you in?
Yeah, well, I just turned 45 this summer. So I think I'm kind of like officially in my midlife. I've reached the midlife point, I think. And I have noticed this huge shift just in motherhood. I think it's just been the last few years. So I have my oldest is 19 and my youngest is 8. So I still have a couple of little kiddos, but then I have this whole slew of like teenagers. I have 3 teenagers and a tween right now, and then a little girl who's 8. Um, so that's the season I'm in, is this whole new, how do I parent older kids and how do I figure out how to be part of their lives and not in control of their lives?
Mhm.
And so that feels really new to me. So I'm definitely in autumn. Just looking at your graphic that you sent, I'm like, oh, that describes 45 so perfectly. And I do think it's a matter of, yeah, how am I going to get through this season in a, you know, relatively sane and happy, healthy way? And so I love the idea of like the trust in yourself and the befriending yourself. And that's been kind of a different way of knowing or treating myself than I had as a younger person. And so I'm grateful that I have sort of started along that path. Still definitely not perfect at that, but as I'm learning to let go of my kiddos and some of the things that um, are going on with them and just stages that they're hitting and new things, I've really had to figure out how to be true to myself, I think, through that. So that's the current stage um, that I'm in.
Yeah, and 5 kids, you said, right?
Hmm.
So it's a lot. Like my experience with 3 is like, yeah, a lot of what you learn first go helps, but not everything, because they're different humans, right? They have different needs. And
Yeah.
so there's so much stretching and learning that's going on all the time, as you're also doing your own internal healing growth work and tending to all the other, responsibilities. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think some of that, like, I don't have as much tolerance for people type of question. I definitely feel that. I think it is me again kind of grappling with control. When you have little kiddos, you feel like you're really in control of the day and your household and, a lot of the things that they're doing. And a 19-year-old and a 17-year, you don't have that anymore. And it can feel really, really, really frustrating. So I keep kind of having to turn to myself. And I loved that in that graphic you talked about pouring in. And so
Mhm.
I've been learning how to kind of put that energy there, um, because that's really all I have much control over.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and then as young adults, it's a whole new stretching, learning to I feel anyways, like a relearning the parenting relationship and the release and all the things, all sorts of stages. But yeah, but it's also good. I love this stage of my life with more independence and freedom.
I do
And like,
too.
yeah.
Yeah. There's so much beauty there. But I kind of have to like retrain my focus, I think, on that because there is a lot of chaos around. And so I kind of have to really look for those moments of beauty and yeah.
Well, you're really in the thick of it though, like an 8-year-old, like that's like, it'll be different probably when, all of them leave the nest, right? Like,
Yeah.
or, move. Yeah. Yeah, there's a whole new level of liberation that can be quite joyful. Um, okay, so thank you both. So I had some little notes for myself here. I don't think I'm going to read them too much because I feel like we've kind of touched on some of them naturally. The one thing I will say is just that, in midlife, I feel like I have been brought to my knees over and over and over by circumstances that I can't control. And I think that's true for all of us. It's not always, some of the experiences are not necessarily traumatic in our lives, and some of them might be. By the time you reach midlife, like especially by the time you reach like 50, I'm convinced that every human has encountered loss in some way. You've gone through some stuff to get there. And I kind of feel like people need medals or like stripes on their bodies, like to prove like, look what I've done. Maybe that's what wrinkles do for us. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm storing them here.
That's a fun little reframe on what wrinkles represent. I love it.
I've seen some beautiful stuff online, like more and more lately, where I can't think of anything specific, but things like, like why would you want to erase that? Like the crow's lines, a sign of like what, or the crease here. Like I wear, I think I've written before about like scars and tattoos, like just being like
Mhm.
symbols of like what my lived experience on my body. And I'm like, why would I want to erase that? It's
Yeah.
proof that I'm here. It's proof that I'm brave. It's proof that I keep choosing life, And anyway, and that could lead us into conversations about women's bodies and how we think about ourselves anyway. So yeah, so this idea of kind of being brought to our knees, and whether it's sort of a lighter experience or something that's really life altering or self altering, those experiences, I think, are examples of where we kind of like bump up against reality and have to come to terms with the truth of what is. In some cases, it could be realizing like, maybe like late 30s, early 40s, where you're like, oh, is this what it means to be an adult? I kept thinking there was like something more I was going to get to and feel like a full grown adult. Or um, it could be experiences of, real loss or pain or whatever, where we have to keep grappling with, oh yeah, this is my life. Like, now what? But aging, a diagnosis, like there's so many examples, right, that we can kind of talk about. But I think we have to talk about the reality. I think we must, in order to bring kindness into the experience, right? Like so that we can hold ourselves like in compassion as we navigate these very difficult experiences and try to the best of our ability to release shame and judgment and the story that I'm doing it wrong. Where did I go wrong? I must have done, it's all on me. And you guys can tell me in a moment if you feel like it, but I'm somebody who has had to remind myself over and over and over throughout my life. It's like, oh yeah, it's not all on me. I am not responsible for the well-being of every human and every choice my kids make and every circumstance. Like I didn't go wrong. I was always doing the best I knew how to do, but life is messy. Okay, so have you had one or more lived experiences of needing to let go of the life you wanted to embrace the life you had? And so if you're willing to share about however you want to address that topic. And Mikala, why don't we start with you?
Yeah, sure. I think this is something I've learned several times in my life. I really like pretty pictures, and so I always like to think like, okay, it's gonna be all smooth sailing from here now, and
Yeah.
then like something else comes along. But I think I got this lesson really early on in my marriage, actually. So it wasn't in midlife, but very early, I had to be like, oh, there's this picture of life and how it's supposed to be. And then there's like actual life. So, a few years into our marriage, my husband began to struggle with drugs and alcohol. And so it was early in my residency years as well. And he was in and out of rehab a few times. And I really just, it had never occurred to me before then. And it's so funny to say that, but in my mid 20s, it just had never occurred to me that like things happen and you don't have control over them. It was the first time that I'd ever, had to evaluate the picture of what I had in my head. And then realize that my life was nothing like that. And sort of let that picture go. So it's so funny. It took me years to even begin to think that. He was actively using for 7 or 8 years. And we had 2 children during that time. I just kind of kept charging forward with the plan, and just kept thinking, like, maybe when we start a family, or maybe once we get out, he's also in medicine. And so it was like, maybe once we get through residency, that's all this is. And once we get out and kind of get our jobs and everything's going to get better. And I finally had to get to the point of this realization, like, oh, he's maybe not going to get better. And it's actually really possible that he's going to die from this. Um, and then I had to sort of start from there. And I learned so much through that. And so now I can take some of those things as things crop up now. Because even now we are so lucky. He's been clean and sober for 15 years. But those same principles of letting go of the picture of how life is supposed to go, or what the expectations are, or what the world maybe tells us is a successful life, just kind of keeps circling around. Um, Even as recently as yesterday, I received a little bombshell from one of my children, and that's all I'm going to give as far as details. But suddenly the trajectory of our lives, our family, and what it looks like, and for them going forward is very different. And I don't think there's any going back from that. And so I'm kind of just put in the middle again of, okay, here's another time that like we've taken a detour and life is going to look different than you thought maybe it would.
I think I might have planned to come there, but I'm just going to ask you right now, what are the anchoring things in your life that help you when these things are swirling around you? Because I'm thinking of like one of the things for me has always been my values, my core values, and the recognition that I can always walk out my values. It doesn't matter what's happening around me or in the world, that is within my control. The way in which I can do that will look different day to day, season to season, but I can always, always walk out my values, and it helps me feel a sense of power, versus being disempowered. Yeah. So for you, what are the things that have kept you steady?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things I think growing up, I was always really performative. And even into my 20s, I was really performative. And going back to kind of your hope map, the pouring into myself and kind of understanding that there are a lot of things in the world that I cannot control, but there's a lot within me that I can control. And so I do get to have control over how I'm responding now. And so one of those things is prioritizing my needs, which I used to maybe have always thought would have sounded selfish. And now I'm like, no. So I already went out for a good long walk today to kind of just process. So movement is really important for me. I have a really, really wonderful support system of friends. And so reaching out to them and saying, oh, crisis mode a little bit, and having them show up for me. And knowing to do that sooner than later. It's so sad to me now when I think about younger me with a husband who was struggling and going to rehab. I didn't tell anyone about that. I just sort of carried that because it felt so shameful to me. Um, and thank goodness that I've learned that. So I liked what you said, like, I'm not in control of those things, and I don't have to feel wrong or bad or ashamed of how things are going. I can still walk out those values, right? I will say that kind of focusing in on I get to choose how to respond to this was like the instant thought that came to my head. And I didn't have a family growing up where you could come to your parent with a hard thing. And so mostly I carried my burdens privately. Um, and I don't want to give that to my children. I'm hoping that, I can walk with them and help them carry that burden. And so I was grateful to give the response yesterday that maybe I would have liked to have had as a young
Mhm.
person. Um, and it's so strange how that can be kind of healing for you too, right? Like the
Yeah,
response
like a
that
reparative
it kind,
experience almost.
yeah, it kind of was. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm walking through right now. I'm really paying attention to like immediate needs. Whenever I enter one of these periods, like, are you hungry? Are you thirsty? Are you tired? Do you need to move your body? Do you need to
Yeah.
call someone? Um, so paying attention to those things first. And then I have a really great friend, Amy, who told me, I don't know, a few weeks ago, probably the last thing that happened. I don't even remember what it was now. But she gave me the idea of like her therapist had told her to remind herself that whatever's happening with her children or loved ones or people around her, it doesn't necessarily mean it's happening to her.
Mm,
So to kind of separate from those things
yeah,
and to say, okay, but you are actually safe right now. You
right.
are not experiencing this thing. Because I have always kind of muddied my emotions and my reactions with my very dear ones. Um, so she's a treasure to me right now. I don't know if I answered your question.
You did. Yeah, you did. Yeah, I actually just talked to my current therapist about this in the last week as well. Like she was saying, is it possible for you to, I don't know, we were talking about depersonalizing people's behavior or whatever. I'm like, oh yeah, like with other humans walking in the world, I'm like, yeah, I can see, oh, there they are, a wounded human doing their best to get their needs met and all the things. But like with my children,
Yeah.
very, 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 very hard. Like, yeah, so ongoing work to do
Yep.
there. All right, thanks, Mikala, for that. So Jennifer, I'm just going to kind of repeat the question for you because you've waited so patiently. Um, have you had one or more lived experiences of needing to let go of the life you wanted to embrace the one you have?
Yeah. Yes. I it was really great to listen to Mikala articulate everything that you just did so nicely because it's helping me find the answer that feels right. So thank you. But I am an empath and an INFJ. The only reason I think that's important and that I continue to say it is because when I was in my mid 30s going through a divorce, I learned that that particular personality type is oriented to pick up on other people's feelings before their own, anything
Mhm.
outside of you instead of what's inside of you first. And not getting that information until you're well into your 30s in a trauma state is something because it requires a lot of unraveling of how you understood the world and how you have um like walked through the world and what you thought was normal that really isn't normal. And so when I look back now with these fresh eyes, having come out of that trauma state and being able to see it for what I believe it really was, all of it, what I can see is that from like before I was 10, I was having chronic conditions and mind body conditions and not all mind-body conditions, just things that are common to people with highly sensitive bodies, deeply sensitized, reactive nervous systems and bodies. It doesn't mean that we're not taking care of ourselves, and it also doesn't mean that we could have done anything to make it different. And so there's been a lot of retroactive recognition of the fact that I've been dealing with my absolute lack of control, um, in pretty much all the ways that I can think of. You know, you don't really have control over your health and what you can and can't tolerate. Um, just in terms of interrelationship, you don't really have control over the fact that I just know what you're feeling before I know what I'm feeling. And that's so important to recognize. And the emotional intensity piece, which, yes, I'm highly sensitive, so, I'm fragile, but I also have kind of everything I experience feels like I experience it with the volume knob turned all the way up. And again, that's not something that I'm choosing. So,
Mhm.
and then I went through a divorce in my early 30s that really rocked me. It sort of started all of this awareness. So it really just, the floor opened up and swallowed me whole. That's what it felt like. And so the last 10 years have really been a process of crawling out of first thinking, okay, if I can just get over this divorce, everything will be fine, right? And then realizing that the reason you landed in that relationship probably has a lot to do with the fact that you're an empath. So if I can just empower myself as an empath, everything will be fine. But then you have to recognize that you have a highly sensitive body, and those are more prone to mind-body conditions. And what is that? And why, if I'm at peace with the divorce now, why am I now forced to recognize lifelong familial patterns that made me more susceptible to getting into that relationship, right? And then I'm in midlife, and the relationship with those familial influences is changing because that's what happens when we get older, right? So the first question, where is your lens different? Is your tolerance less? It's a weird thing to have this super clear lens on like family members and parents and grandparents, like everyone who has surrounded you all your life, with the awareness of things like generational trauma and family dynamics and relational dynamics. So, and then while going through all this, continually having to deal with a highly sensitive body. And in the last 8 years, I have experienced the loss of the two people who, separate from my parents, I would say meant the most to me. Um, or I should rephrase that. I should say the two people who made me feel most seen and most loved and most like myself in my life.
Mhm.
And so I lost one, and then in the recovery phase from that, just as soon as I was almost okay, then I lost the other. And
Mhm.
so it's all been a very it's been a few years since the second loss, and I'm just feeling in a very embodied way how little control I really have over much. And that the only thing I really have any control over, like Mikala and you have been saying, is how I react. But for me, more importantly, is my relationship with myself.
Mhm.
Because going through all of that, and I think as sensitive people, it's probably true for everyone, but I can only speak from my own experience. Being a sensitive person who lives with a lot of these things unwittingly, having appreciation for our bodies is hard. Having any sense of peace, um, or like not resentment or hatred, or, is really hard. And so the um sorry, I'm emotional, so I forgot what I was saying. Um, but that part, just coming back to that as like an anchor, I might be cart before the horsing just a little because this was part two of your question to Mikala, but the
No worries.
the idea of Just being able to have empathy for myself, prioritizing the work that makes it possible for me to have empathy for myself is huge. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's a lot to look back at your life and realize that you really have actually been living this message long before you realized what the message was. Um, so yeah, I think that's part of the autumn feeling is like, oh my God, look at that whole big tree, and now watch it fall away, and now I'm supposed to do something else with it. Yeah, it's
Mhm.
very revolving.
So thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry for all of that loss that you've been living.
Thanks.
And as you share about, I don't consider myself an empath, but I am a highly sensitive human, and two of my kids are as well. And there's like, I learned about it in my early 30s. That was my first glimpse of high sensitivity. And then I had to go like seek information and keep learning. What does that mean? But I'm still unpacking it. I'm still unpacking the shame stories around it. Like, the judgments. I should be able to do this easier. And you like really, I was really resonating with what you were saying about like even now in my current experience, like having a trauma response in this particular month that I wasn't expecting 5 years after the death of my child, and living in a highly sensitive system as well. It means like it makes sense. Like I had to look to numbing mechanisms for most of my life because the intensity would destroy me, like literally, like um and and so like that's why, a lot of highly sensitive souls have suicidal ideation and stuff. We don't know what to do with this experience. It's so big and so intense, and like living in a body like that all the time is exhausting. It doesn't mean every day is exhausting or every season is, but so like I do think people need to know, like, and I'll often say like that coping mechanism, like even if it was drugs or alcohol, it kept you alive. It brought you to the point where now you're more resourced and you know how to ask for help and you know how to start learning some new regulation strategies or whatever. But I think that what it's bringing up for me is how I say like living with joy doesn't mean the joy is the only experience. And understanding nervous system regulation, understanding high sensitivity, it doesn't mean it all like magically makes everything comfortable or easy. It means you're face to face with the truth of who you are and how you move through the world. And we can keep healing and all of that, but it's just like I think our culture is just always looking for a fix, right? And then we feel wrong if we don't have the fix. And honestly, in wellness culture online, I do encounter this still over and over and over, even though I curate my feed intentionally. We could be talking about almost anything, and you can walk away feeling wrong. And we have to be really boundaried, right? And careful around whose voices we're listening to, because why do we believe the story that there is a way, we just haven't found it yet? We haven't found the right pill, the right habit, or whatever to help us just feel completely at ease and giddy every second of every day.
Yeah, I just wish I could stand up and like cheer to that because, oh, I could talk about that all day. Especially in the medical world, women's health and wellness and fitness and beauty has really capitalized on offering us these solutions and promising these solutions and telling us if we could just find the right supplement or diet or exercise or whatever it is,
Mhm.
that would be the answer to our lives, to our happiness and to our success. And it is maddening because I think it makes people feel like they're always chasing something and they can't find it. And so they feel like they're wrong or they're broken.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, oh, go ahead, Jennifer.
You sure?
Yeah.
Okay. Me too. I would stand up and cheer. I just wanted to lend my yes to what both of you are saying. I know in my world, there is I'm okay with it, but I often feel like like the dark horse in the race. Because on wellness platforms in particular, I feel like there's a narrative or like a presentation, particularly for sensitive people, of like unicorns and you're laying in a field of flowers and you have sparkles and kittens and it's very Pollyanna sunshine as the aspirational energy, right?
Hmm.
And maybe it's just because my focus is on trauma and the acknowledgement of the truth of the things as they live in their bodies. But so often with private clients and in writing circles, when I say, hey, we're going to give your body a voice, let's see what comes out, the number one thing I hear from people is, I'm sorry ahead of time because this is so dark. And I'm constantly telling people like that's the majority. Like that's what happens to everybody because nobody, at least nobody I've ever known, feels like they're laying in a field of butterfly. Like hopefully you have moments, right? Resourced, delicious, wonderful moments, but like the truth of trying to be at peace with yourself, if that's a challenge for you, it really does require that we acknowledge how hard it is, and we don't try to sugarcoat anything, or we don't ask you to tell us the truth but
Mhm.
only like 75% of the truth, because that's not helping
Yeah.
anybody.
Mhm.
It's
I know, I always feel like my work is a hard sell. I'm like, I'm going to take you
I
into the
know.
darkness. I'm not going to take you anywhere, but the work invites you to go into this kind of stuff. And I'm like, and it won't be better overnight. And you're going to work hard. And it's like, yeah, who wants to give me their money?
So much same.
Ah, but yeah. Yeah, so I love this. I love the sort of little bit of a turn in the conversation. I do think it's healing. I do believe that um I experience and I believe that we can learn to witness the beauty, feel the good stuff, look outside the window and see the pumpkins and colored leaves, like, and enjoy that and savor the gifts of this, and also be noticing, oh, there's this pain in my body. Oh, there's this other thing I'm anxious about, and hold that, right? Like, that's where I think there's a lot of wisdom and a lot of resilience, comes from that ability to hold the complexity and the paradox. Um, but we can't paint a false picture,
Yeah.
or else we're contributing to the culture of shaming and self-judgment and all of that stuff that goes along with it. Um so continuing along the same path, Mikala, what do you wish there was more honest talk about then in the um well, in your line of work, in the communities in which, that you belong to, specifically related to midlife? And the other part of that question was, what mythologies or messaging do you think needs changing?
Yeah, I wanted to come back to just that idea of what you said, that not everything is fixable. I think that is the narrative that I wish could be changed for the women that I get to speak with so much. I think one of the greatest privileges of practicing medicine is that I get to meet so many women and they share their story with me. And I realize like what a gift they have given me to sort of let me see their real lives. Um, and I know they're always looking for how do I fix this? How do I make this
Right.
go away? How do I make it better? And we don't always have an answer to that. And so, part of what I tried to do with my new book is just help guide women toward what they can do, the options they do have. But I
Mhm.
also really want to combat all the marketing that says there is an answer to that. You don't actually have to age. Like anti-aging is one of
Right.
those things I just can't stand. That isn't real. And so, if I could just change the idea that you can fix everything for people, to something like, hey, let's see how you can feel better, or how, what you can tolerate, or how we can help you be comfortable through this time. Or, there's so many other words I think we could use instead of just the fix, and how much
Mm.
peace is available when we kind of stop chasing that fix to our lives and to our bodies.
Okay, so this is a spin-off question. I didn't prepare you for it. So
Okay.
answer it, don't answer it, totally up to you, and I'll honor your choice. So I've had quite a few conversations with around menopause and the ways that we talk about menopause as an experience, um for instance, like, do we pathologize it and look at
Mhm.
it as something defective about the female body that needs correction through, hormone therapies? But then enters, debate around HRT is bad, HRT is good.
Mhm.
Like, and I'm kind of like, mind your own business and let women trust, make choices for their own bodies. Um, anyway, so there's this big conversation happening. I do think it's good because, like, even my husband is listening in to these conversations, which is wonderful. And he comes and says, like, I heard this, and I'm like, that's amazing, that you care about this and you're listening and paying attention. What was my point though? We were talking about the fix. Oh yeah. So, but what was coming to mind is how it's a both and. Like, I think,
Mhm.
as always, because I don't think it's helpful for us to always just stay on the surface of let's fix the symptom without going into what is there that needs attending. So I often think about, not always, like, but often, how I'll speak to my own body, because I don't think it's helpful to say this to another person, but like, my pain is often pointing me towards
Yeah.
freedom. So for instance, menopause, one of the experiences could be like, I'm pissed off and resentful because I'm doing too much. I've been over functioning, over giving for way too long. And now it's time to hand this stuff back and tell other people to take responsibility for their own stuff, or just to learn how to get out of it, right? Stop trying to meddle in other people's happiness to make me feel comfortable. So for me, I wouldn't want to just take a pill for my anger. I would want to go into the anger also and notice how much I've been chasing love by making everybody else happy. Like, you know
Sure.
what I mean? So that, like, both and, like, I'm just curious if that made sense to you. Do you have anything to say about that? Like, that sort of complexity when you're helping women make choices. But like, is there no fix, or is there no easy fix, or what does that mean, in some of these cases?
Yeah, I think the answer is, I love the both and. There is no easy fix. I do feel like menopausal hormone therapy is having its moment in the spotlight right now, and so we're learning a lot about it and talking a lot about it, and people have a lot of opinions about it. And it's kind of from it's super bad, and if you take it, like, you're going to get cancer, right? That's kind of what we used to hear. And then it's like, everyone should be on it. If you're menopausal or perimenopausal, everyone should be on it because it will fix all of your symptoms. You won't have any more brain fog or anger, or, any of the symptoms associated with perimenopause. And the answer is somewhere in the middle, I think. The hard part about menopausal hormone therapy is, um, gosh, it's different for every woman and every woman's experience. Everyone has such different symptoms. Perimenopause is like puberty. Everyone has a little bit of a different story there. And so in this case, specifically, we do treat symptoms. So we don't treat levels. We don't often get to like a root cause, other than to say, hey, we know it's not these things. We've done blood work to rule out these other things. So let's give you hormone therapy if you'd like to try it to help alleviate those symptoms. Um, I think that right now, what I'm seeing is that's frustrating is menopausal hormone therapy isn't going to prevent you from having any symptoms or from going through menopause. If you have a uterus and ovaries and you live long enough, you're going to go through menopause. And so the idea is just to help you through that transition with symptoms that are tolerable to you.
Yeah. And I really appreciate that, because, like, I've already sort of touched on this, but anything that reeks of shaming women for one more thing, I'm not into it.
Yeah.
Because it reminds me a lot of like the discussions around medication for mental health or whatever. It's like, I don't care that it doesn't help everybody. I care that it helps some people stay alive so
Yeah.
then they can get the help they need and take action in their lives and whatever, and I guess what I just want is more nuanced conversation all
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
And I know
I,
it's less neat and tidy than making a grand declaration that this is the one thing that we should all do, but
right. And I don't love when it is promoted to kind of maintain youthfulness and,
right,
that the shape of your body and all of these things that are still kind of that cultural ideal of what is like beauty. And um, to me, that is just, again, kind of shameful. It's like in disguise. Like, let us
right,
help you not be a crazy middle-aged woman with a little bit of a tummy, like, because that's
yeah,
not acceptable. I don't know. That
mhm.
that part is hard.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Hmm. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to say about like what you wish there was more honest talk around?
Yeah, I think that's the main thing. I would say that I am an empath. And in general, when I would see patients in clinic, often when I talk with my girlfriends now, I wish that what I could press into someone is there isn't anything wrong with you. You aren't bad and you aren't defective and you aren't broken. You
Mhm.
might have something wrong with your body. There might be an illness there that we can work on together, but it's not you. You're not
Mhm.
you are not a broken person.
Mhm.
Because I think so many people, if you just dug in a little bit, that is like the underlying belief. There's
Mhm.
something wrong with me. So I know that's what I'm combating in my 40s is changing that inner voice for myself and that narrative for myself. And I wish that I could give that to other women.
Yeah. I just had that conversation in my Brave and Beautiful membership community last night because that's just
Ah,
one of the core things that I talk about and remind people of my beliefs. Again, I don't believe in speaking over anybody else because I remember there were times like after my son died that I felt broken. I felt like, and it's like I understand that, but that still doesn't mean that Krista at the core, real true self Krista, she was never broken. Right.
yeah,
There was all sorts of pain and wounding and confusion and all the things, but yeah, it's like, yeah, it's a message that we need to keep sharing. Yeah.
yeah. You aren't bad. Yeah, the core of you is a whole human. So if I
Mhm.
could let everyone feel just a piece of that, even for a little bit, like I just think that's life changing.
Yeah. And really, I think that's what Jennifer was speaking to as well, even with the sensitivity and that too, is right. Like, I am not wrong. I am not bad, wrong, or broken. Like, yeah. So Jennifer, let's move to you. And then we may not get to all the questions I had, but we'll probably start heading towards wrapping up. But what do you wish that there was more honest talk around?
Yeah, I very much in line with what Mikala and you have been saying. Because my focus is really oriented to sensitive women, it's not a different conversation. It's just like tailored to if you are someone who is highly sensitive, deeply empathic, energetically aware and affected. And if you're deep, if you're sensitive and if you're deep, all traits in addition to being a woman, right, that aren't necessarily celebrated, or an aging woman. I loved what you said about like a crazy midlife woman with a tummy. But like in addition to those things, if you are on the fringes of what's normal in our society anyway, in terms of your sensitivity and what that means you need, and what that means that you really need to thrive, because a lot of times it's slightly shifted. It's a little bit different. Most people need A, B, and C, and you need A, B, C, D, E, F, and G. And I think my message, particularly when you reach midlife, because usually this is either when we start awakening, doing the work, or we've been doing it for about 10 years now, is you don't have to be different to find happiness or peace or joy or to be okay. You just have to know that those things you might find them from unexpected places. And that really comes back to the self-trust part, right? And anyone who's listening, whether they're sensitive or not, I think the part where inside myself, I know that this is what would make me feel better, or this is how I feel best represented. This is how I like to present myself. This is what my real voice sounds like. This is what my true passions are. Those kinds of things, instead of nobody understands this. This isn't normal, so I should be different. I shouldn't have this need. I shouldn't love this thing because most people don't get it. That narrative, you don't have to take that narrative to heart, because the truth is, most of the people, sensitive or not sensitive, that you interact with that make you feel like you're a problem just for being your authentic self, have their own work to do, and you're really better off not trying to bend yourself to their expectation.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I I think just let your work be about trying to be okay with yourself. And yes, I think that's true for sensitivity, but then, like for me personally, in the midlife phase where my body is changing, my capacity is like, I used to be about here, and now I'm like here all the time. And it's been literally like 6 months, and I've had to show up way less in all of the places where people are used to me showing up, and do less. And I just had an experience last week you mentioned earlier where you were like, yeah, I had these plans to like create this and share this and say this about this. And now I'm lucky sometimes if I can send one email. It's like, I did this thing. Here's the link. Go check it out. I hope you like it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But, and there is still very much an internal narrative that I have of like, you're not doing enough. That's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
People expect you to be more than this. And, but then I really try to remember that, okay, so you're you're going through physical things, and there's no fixing them, there's just working with them, right? Like Mikala said, but a lot of those things are like the not serving people things that you can do, right? Take a nap, sit with yourself in quiet for a while, have a meal. It's almost always not putting other people first that helps us. And so I think just
Or the trusting yourself again, like you're trusting your pace, trusting that it is enough, even though it looks different than what you perceive to be the norm online. How people show up. Yeah.
yeah, and also I think the trusting that you are worth prioritizing, because that's a big ask, right?
Yeah.
And it's you can like reinforce that new narrative in the million little ways where you're like, I'm gonna let you handle your own thing, and then I'm just gonna sit here and watch a funny something because laughing is medicine and it makes me feel better. Those kinds of things, I think,
Yeah.
could feed a new narrative to like all women in midlife. I think it would be around that you don't necessarily have to fix anything. You your work would be better served fixing whatever lives in you that makes you think that you do.
Yes, I love that. Yeah. Thank you for articulating that. All right. So we're going to wrap up. But what this made me think of is, kind of where we started, let go of the life you wanted, embrace the one you have. One of the things that has been important for me that I'm still in it in some ways, but I hear versions of it a lot from the women I work with, is like the idea of like almost thinking, well, you're waiting for the day that you get your energy back or your brain works the way it used to, or all the things. And it's like just realizing what we need to let go of that's keeping us kind of stuck in the past. And we're not going to go back there. That's not even a thing. And so if we can release that, it opens us up to sort of like look forward and start thriving forward in a new way in this body, in this life, in this season. Yeah. Okay, so feel free. Let's start with you, Mikala. tell people where they can come connect with you? And if you want, just briefly, you could share also what's bringing you joy.
Oh, sure. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Mikala Albertson MD. And then I have a website under that name as well, MikalaAlbertsonMD.com. You can find all the info about my book there. And I have some free resources over there too that you might want to check out. And then I have an additional Instagram page called Be Well-ish. That is less of my own personal writing and stuff about my family or my feelings. And it really is just women's health focused.
Okay.
And the book is available anywhere books are sold. It's called Everything I Wish I Could Tell You About Midlife. It's a woman's guide to health in the body you actually have. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, wherever you'd like to find it.
Nice.
Oh, and then the thing that's bringing me joy, I have a really silly one. But I have this amazing and wonderful cat named Jimmy. And every day I think I have 3 cats. Actually, I'm kind of a cat lady, but he in particular brings me so much joy. Every day I just think, you are a joy to me.
Mm,
So that's the silly thing, but he's my one constant. He's near me all the time.
nice. I love that pets can really get us laughing like nothing else, no one else. Yeah. Thanks, Mikala. How about
Sure.
you, Jennifer? Where can people connect with you and what's bringing you joy these days?
Okay, well, people can connect with me. I'm on Instagram and Facebook at Highly Sensitive Healing, and I have a website that is my name, jenniferarnspiger.com. And there are a ton of, it's a very sensitive, introvert friendly place. So there's a ton of information and resources and like exploration and self-study options, as well as some courses that have really like writing inspiration and courses that I myself have taken that have gotten me to the place that I am now. So I love sharing those. And yeah, those are the main reach me places. And then the thing that's been bringing me joy, this is interesting, and I hope it's deep enough. I don't mean to, I just, that's such a typical me thing to say. I hope this is deep. But um as a person who has always loved intense shows, right? Like I love the Law and Orders and the scary movies, and like I'm a very autumn personality. That's always been my comfort level. Like everybody else is like, oh, I want to watch something shiny, and I'm like, give me a grimy, dark horror movie. That's what I really want. And last 6, 8 months or so, and I think it has to do with this transition and all the loss and all the reconciliation, I can't get enough half-hour light comedies. Every time I'm exhausted and I've worked, or I need a little, I need a little effervescence in my system or something, I am there for blooper reels and like Seinfeld episodes,
Mm.
things that will actually make me laugh out loud. It's so medicinal and so anchoring. I'm surprised that I'm turning into this person, but those are bringing me like safety and joy, actually.
I love that. Yeah, in the hardest season of my life, I encountered The Office.
Oh,
I
The
had never,
Office.
yeah, I've sometimes considered like watching it all again. But it was, yeah, that along with my first cat, they kept me laughing. So yeah.
Good.
Thank you both for being here. Really appreciated the conversation and your openness. And to everybody listening, until next time, make peace with messiness to make space for joy. See you.
Love that. Thank you, Krista.
Bye.
Thank you.